Excuse me. You should put the...
I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the joint meeting of the Anchorage Assembly and School Board, March 23rd, 2018. Madam Clerk, please do the roll call.
Chair Trainee.
Here.
Vice Chair Dunbar.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Croft. Ms. Nabosky. Here. Mr. Dyson.
Here.
Ms. LaFrance. Here. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Rivera. Mr. Steele. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Chair Trainee, you have a quorum of the Assembly members.
Thank you.
President Augusta Beasley. Here. Member Davis. Member Donnelly.
Here.
Member Holloman.
Here.
Member Marset. Member Plunkett. She's excused. And Member Snelling. Here.
Good. Forrest, could you listen to the pledge, sir?
Oh, yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, my thanks to the school board members that are here. I understand you guys had an interesting day yesterday. Besides the rest of the town, you guys did with the schools. Everything's accounted for today. Is it working better for you guys?
We canceled school.
Well, I know you canceled school, but
It's better.
but you didn't do the whole school district. You just didn't agree with Chugach.
Yes, sir. Yeah, just if I just go ahead and share. We were notified, just so you know, like everyone else was the night before, but we've had closures on the highway, but really rerouting it through the town, they clogged all those other areas to get to schools. And so we had not only students that couldn't arrive, but staff that couldn't arrive either to their work location. It was about 2 hours late, and so we feared everything was about 2 hours late then, because the buses rerun, so the high school buses run the middle school, then go to do elementary. It's a 3-tier system. So what we decided to do yesterday afternoon was end school for high schools at 12:30, an hour and a half early, so that they could get the kids home. Our goal was to have students delivered to their homes prior to the end of the day commute traffic. We were fearful that if it ran late from high school, they would be right in the thick of that, and elementary kids wouldn't even, get home till 6 or 7 at night. So we adjusted midday and saw what a problem it was, and then the fix is just a minor fix. So taking our high school kids and our parents that drop off kids and the buses off the road, we were hoping that would assist with the actual commute.
Well, thank you so much. And my wife teaches at Charming, and some of the teachers there live in the valley, so they couldn't make it in either. So.
And I apologize for not being here yesterday.
You were caught in the traffic jam?
No, I was smart enough to go and look.
I thought maybe you were out directing traffic or something, Fred. I told Amy we need to put a toll booth out there and collect $1 from everybody to pay for road construction. She may be out there today doing that.
Too bad they didn't have Girl Scout cookies. I bet they could have sold a few to some people.
Or porta potties.
Well, I could say it was a road, but my son is playing in state hockey tournament this morning, so grandson. This last game.
It's good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Let's see, B on there is approval of December 15, 2017 joint meeting minutes. I get approval on the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Is there any objection to the minutes or any changes? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Approval of the agenda. Look at the agenda for a minute. If I get a motion to approve the agenda, or is there something you want to add to it?
Move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ask unanimous consent. See no objection. The agenda in front of us is approved. Let's get to items of business. ASD fiscal year 2018-2019 budget.
Well, we'd like to thank the Assembly for passing.
How many testified on that? Do you remember?
How many testified?
Yeah.
During our meeting or during your meeting?
During our meeting. Do you know how many testified?
Can you speak, I think? One. One person.
I've been at this for a while. I remember years past. We had them coming in by the droves. Whatever you're doing is working well. because there's only one person there.
I'd like to recognize the administration for being very open and accountable, transparent with the budget book and all the budget documents. If people really have a desire to get into deep into the weeds, they have that opportunity. And of course, our finance meetings, our work sessions, and our regular meetings are all wide open too. So that's
certainly
thumbs up to the
if the team could stand, we have Andy Ratliff and our Chief Finance Officer Jim Anderson. And thank you for noticing as well as the board president. This starts in October every year, and we meet with groups at the all stakeholder groups, and then build the budget from there. And so it's very inclusive from the beginning, rather than a surprise at the end. So thank you, and I just want to thank the team for that.
Everybody should be congratulated. It was well done, and thank you very much. Again, the message out to the public, if they had concerns. And I appreciate you being with us in a work session. So many assembly members' concerns were handled at our work session. So I appreciate that. Yes, Tam?
One final note is, it is our greatest desire that this is the only time we'll do the budget this year.
Let's
And,
hope so.
but that's yet to be seen in terms of what happens with the legislation. Anticipation is this will be the only time we do the budget, but that's not under.
We hope you're right. But
And unless we exceed revenue.
yes, Andy. Do you what?
Unless we exceed revenue.
Yes, I will.
Yeah. Gladly adjust if they add something in.
Anything else on item number 1 from anybody here? Let's move down to number 2. School District 6-year capital improvement plan.
Again, I want to make one statement. This is a plan that we approved in February, but I think many of you are aware we're waiting for some final report from Western Demographics, and we do have someone here today that Bishop will be introducing. Recommendations may very well impact that 6-year plan, and the board will bring that up for discussion again in the very near future.
Have you looked at the impact of the land that Include Nave Corporation wants to develop in the Chugach area? There's a bunch of homes they want to put in there, and that would impact the school attendance dramatically in that area. Because I know the city's been looking at the lack of land here in the bowl. But when I take a look at the land that's available out there by the Native Corporation for homes, for development, that's going to be a lot of homes going in that area if it's approved.
And we, right now, we have a lot of capacity, so that would be welcome. Dr. Bishop.
Thank you. You had mentioned the work session, and when I shared and reported back to the board about the work session, a good portion of that information was really about capital and our buildings and our space capacity and how we use staffing with that, and the relationship between operational funds and capital monies. And I answered, and Andy answered as we could, but today the board requested Shannon Bingham from Western Demographics to be here, and I wanted to introduce that and just share a little bit of an overview for which he shared with the board, his initial work in the capacity study and possibly boundary changes, as well as school consolidation, school construction, just a major plan, a 10-year plan rather than what are we going to do next year. He's also the gentleman that is really crowdsourcing and working with us on changing school start times, and I know several members talked about school start times and teen sleep. So without further ado, if he could, he's going to provide the shorter version of the overview for which he provided and has worked with his latest update to the board. The actual final results and recommendations to the board won't be presented to the end of April. And there was a question of, well, what will happen then? You know, what's going to be? And really, at that time, the board will make a decision. It'll be inclusive of testimony and planning and other issues and where we go with how our growth is in the municipality. He has actually worked with the team at the city closely with their demographers here, looking at building permits, open space. So this isn't, again, how to move into a bond or a school closure for next year. It is, what does 10 years out look like for the city of Anchorage, and how can we grow smartly the kinds of schools that we want for the 21st century.
Good.
So with that, I will turn it over to Shannon. And again, just the preliminary information that our board has, and more to come. If you want to see it firsthand, will be at like the second meeting in April. Will be the unveiling of the big news. So.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Is this an appropriate place for me to stand? Or should
I think it's good, Shannon. Can you guys see over here? Because it's on the screen. Can you see over here, John? Okay.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be here and share my work with you. We have been working on this for quite a while. I've been working on it for about 6 months. I'm looking at all of our buildings in the district. I do a lot of this work nationally. I've worked for probably about 200 school districts over the last 35 years. Very impressed by what I see here. Anchorage does a really good job of keeping great data on what it actually has, regardless of the age of the facility. So I'm looking at all of our schools from a variety of rubrics, their education adequacy, how well are they able to deliver our programs, what's their condition, how much prior investment do we have, what year were they built in, average, because a lot of our buildings were built in piecemeal fashion over a period of years. Are they parts of multi-building campuses? What's the long-term growth potential in that neighborhood? So Anchorage is very much like other communities where we have a lot of remaining build-out potential, infill development potential inside of existing attendance areas. So I've done quite a bit of what I call build-out planning elsewhere in the United States for other districts where they're really trying to figure out what are we going to be looking like from a school standpoint once every house that could be built in the community would be built. So I've been working with municipal planning staff to identify that kind of final look at Anchorage housing. And Tom Davis's staff has been working very closely with us, and they're providing us their final data, I think, today. They gave us a part of it yesterday. They gave us a preliminary version of it about 3.5 weeks ago that we were able to work with, and I'll show you a little snippet of that so you'll understand kind of the gist of it. So as you look at this, 2040, that's
Shannon, let me interrupt you for a second. Let the record reflect that we were joined by Mr. Steele. Go ahead, sir.
Great. So 2040, 23 years from now, we think will probably be built out by then. ICER is forecasting that the community will continue to grow, that our school-age population categories will continue to grow. As far as the magnitude of infill housing that happens attendance area by attendance area, that has a strong bearing on the percentage utilization of each one of our schools. So folks that look at our set of schools and say, well, you've got a lot of schools that are not completely utilized, well, the relevant factor is we have to look at where we'll be by the time all of the vacant land in those attendance areas builds out. And that's what this additional municipal data will facilitate our being able to understand. As far as some other observations I've made, most districts in the United States have always done piecemeal renovation of schools. A lot of our buildings that were built in the 50s and 60s are just now kind of reaching the ends of their useful lives. And a lot of districts elsewhere in the country are starting to scrape those buildings off and just do full-scale replacement. We have probably done 8 or 9 of those over the last 20 years. That kind of activity is really accelerating. And one of the challenges I've noted that's different about Anchorage is we have a 1-year CIP process where we're funded with 1-year bonds. And most of the districts that are doing this kind of larger scale replacement as some of these 50 and 60-year-old buildings have kind of come to the end of their useful lives, they've done multi-year bonds in order to facilitate more of that kind of replacement. So that's one of the things that I've observed that's a little bit different about Anchorage relative to some of my other clients. This talks about what will that 2040 additional housing increment look like. Right now we're about 84% built out, and that remaining 15% is what is yet to be built over the next 23 years. That will have a pretty significant effect on some of our school attendance areas, especially in the kind of the interior of the city. We have some areas where some of the schools may be running at about 80%, and when the balance of that housing is absorbed, those schools might wind up running at 90%. So we're trying to be realistic and make sure we acknowledge that long-term final condition of the community before we make any hard decisions about any specific school buildings in our community. On the fringes, we have areas where new schools will be needed. So, for example, in West Park, parts of the Muldoon corridor, we know we have quite a bit of vacant land that's kind of on the edge of the community in areas where we will probably need some new buildings ultimately as those new neighborhoods develop. As far as what does the future look like from a housing mix standpoint, right now we're about half single-family detached, 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses. In the future, the additional housing will look a lot like what the Anchorage Housing Authority is developing along the Muldoon corridor. A lot more townhouse, apartment style, multi-family style development. Nationally, that's also what is the predominant new dwelling type nationally. There's a boom in multi-family housing happening nationally. And the remaining land that's in Anchorage will result in a smaller ultimate percentage of the community being single-family detached. So it will be a little bit more of a higher density community according to the data that we have. That's very consistent with our student data. This next slide shows how our students are deployed. So the red numbers are addresses that we have about a unit number. So those are single-family homes, and then the blue numbers are homes that have a unit number. So we know right off the bat that those are an apartment or a townhouse or some sort of a multi-unit property. So you can see that just focusing on Anchorage alone, excluding J-Bear, that we are about 2/3 single-family detached and about 1/3 multifamily, and over time we expect that balance to shift a little bit. The next slide shows some of the areas where we are seeing quite a bit of rapid development. This is an area where I'm pretty convinced we're going to need a new school just because of the magnitude of what's there. Aside from these active developments, there's quite a bit of infill vacant land that will come online in the future as that continues to develop. So basically, my final recommendations will include a variety of things. After we get that data, we'll be looking at possibly some limited closures or consolidations with reasonable phase-out periods. That means we'll have a period of years where families will get notice that a big change is going to happen. Some children will be able to finish that part of their school career in certain buildings before we take action on a few of our facilities that we have firm information on that suggest that we might need to close something. We'll carefully look at not only our essential schools that are up and operating now and any surplus buildings that get created, and make sure that if we have an innovative program that might be appropriate in that facility, is that a place where we can put something like that? Or if we have an unhoused charter, is there something that we can do to assist by making some space available for them? Some of our schools will continue to have...
Just have to jump the line and see what's going on with that. Sorry, Shannon.
We have some problems with our... Someone's on the telephone.
Who's on the line?
Yes, hello?
Yes. Can I have your name?
Hi. Who's this?
This is the Joint Assembly Anchorage School Board meeting.
Who are you trying to get hold of?
You may have dialed the wrong number.
Yeah, you got...
I'm sorry?
Are you meaning to join this meeting, or you have the wrong number?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was just quiet for a minute, and I wasn't sure.
I don't think they realize that they're like on the record in front of
so that's why there's my.
Do you know you're talking about 60 people right now?
I wasn't sure if it was the right room or not.
Okay, so if you could just
turn your phone on mute.
You've got us now, so we keep hearing all of that noise.
You ascertain Lisa Snelling is still online?
Ms. Snelling, are you online?
Yes, I am still here. Thank you.
Ms. Dabowski?
Yep, I'm still here.
Ms. LaFrance?
I'm here too, thanks.
Who was the gentleman that we were talking to?
And can I have your name? The man that, sir? Oh, thank you.
That wasn't Dean.
We had a golden opportunity.
Anyway, Shannon, go ahead, please.
And won the trip to Maui. So just to resume, reconstruction of essential schools, that basically means if we have some schools that we know are in a really solid neighborhood where they're older schools that may not necessarily be in great condition, we know we have to do potentially some reconstruction of some of those schools over the next 20 years. It's the same process that we've followed during the last 20 years to reconstruct those schools. We may have to do some more of that in the future as well. Associated with that, our boundaries are probably about 30 years, 35 years old in some cases. So there are some housekeeping style boundary changes that I've been working with our transportation department to identify places where not only the needs of children and students might be served, but our operations may become more efficient if we were to make some changes. We might balance enrollment a little bit more effectively between buildings that have heterogeneous utilization rates. So there will be some of those things in my recommendations as well. And then there will probably be a couple of new schools that would be recommended in there as well in order to fill some voids in some spaces.
I'll put you on there.
I just want to know what that means. Heterogeneous. What does that mean?
Oh, one attendance area running at 70%
Don't you have your iPhone? Look it up.
full, and another attendance area running at 90% full. Balance them so they both run at 80%.
Okay. Thank you.
For that kind of thing.
I've got you on the list, Chris.
I just need to understand.
Go ahead, Shannon.
I'm delighted to answer your questions and appreciate the opportunity.
Mr. Dunbar first.
Sorry,
Then
I got
Mr.
on the list.
Peterson.
Do you want to say first, Ms.
I just
Bishop?
wanted to share additional information and the reason that we're working with Shannon and the board moving this way. We know in the past, and as well as former school board members that are now presently on the assembly, and it can go back 15, 20 years, that there has been efforts throughout time to gather these data, but they became more of, because we live in a certain place, it became more emotional to keep something or not have something. So we wanted, rather than having someone who might have a particular interest, whether it's in our city or in the school district or here, to say, I'm doing this and have any information about, you're doing this because you always want to, we wanted someone from the outside to come in, value neutral, no emotion, not that void of emotion, but he doesn't have our emotions, and he can just provide us value neutral feedback for which we then, the board, the assembly, the people of Anchorage can move forward, rather than coming from inside, that whole can't be a prophet in your own land kind of thing. So we wanted to provide the information value neutral.
Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Dunbar, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. So certainly this assembly and this administration has demonstrated a commitment to infill development. We passed the 2040 plan. We have the ADU ordinance coming forward pretty soon. We'll see if that passes or not. But in general, we've been supportive of infill development. And it's also true that over the long term, Anchorage has experienced significant population growth. But that being said, we've seen our population start to level out or even decline, and the decline amongst school-age children has been faster. So I guess I'm questioning why you made these kind of assumptions, given that it looks like we are not growing at the rate we have historically.
ICER continues to forecast that Anchorage will grow, that the school-age populations will grow as well. I received a confirmation from them of their current stats yesterday. It reconfirmed that their expectation over the long term, through 2050, that the community will continue to grow. And with 15% of additional housing being placed online, the assumption is that housing would be occupied, that there wouldn't be other housing elsewhere in the community that would become vacant as that process moves forward. So we're continuing to add additional units, and the expectation is that even though we have a business cycle phenomenon right now that's resulting in us having some up and down years, the expectation is we continue to grow. Now, the education market is not as straightforward as it used to be as far as there being one public school provider and no other players in that market share. We have other folks in that market share that affect the number of children in schools. They're not all in a public school setting. So we know that will also change over time. But my outlook for the district long term is that it will continue over the long term to grow, and that when I say we would put some new schools online in some new areas, that would be neighborhood schools, we would pull other schools offline in other areas that we might expect to decline. So there might actually be a net increase in the total amount of schools that we would have online over time. They would just be in different places.
Mr. Dunbar, continue.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks. That brings up an interesting point, separate from my question, but we just updated the 2040, the land use plan, and the assumptions that base the 2020 land use plan for population growth were not just not met, we readjusted the 2040 land use population growth curve to the 2020 growth curve, right? We didn't just fail, we failed in our projections to the point of we just dropped 20 years of growth down to where we are today. So it's interesting to contemplate ICER. Everyone said we were going to grow, but those numbers just haven't materialized for decades now. So interesting assumption and something to be mindful of in your further analysis. So, and I had this conversation the last time, Ms. Bishop, you spoke about how we intend to avoid local emotion and kind of let policy be driven analytically. And so the question that I have consistently and will continue to ask is about the kind of disparate impacts, the white flight, the issues of unequal investment into neighborhoods where poor people live. And I'm curious if your analysis will produce results that show us kind of the investment relative to income status of the people in those areas, so that we can not just make a decision that's cold and calculated on simple numbers, but on other variables as well.
Well, I'm always very sensitive to housing affordability. So as I look at closure and consolidation questions of a school that might be underutilized, I'm seeing some of the schools that have been suggested as candidates being in what I consider to be solid lower middle class neighborhoods where a lot of families that work and have children can actually afford to live either in an apartment or a single family detached house. That's always kind of right on the top of the things that I consider, because I know that the average family is economically challenged. And so it's something that I always look at as far as housing affordability being a significant factor. But I guess as I'm following very closely what's building in the city right now, and there are kind of two development focuses if you think about it. There's West Park, which is higher end single family detached, and then the Muldoon corridor, which is predominantly, believe it or not, most of that is Anchorage Housing Authority property. And when I go in and I talk with Rebecca, she's telling me what are the rents, how many of them are subsidized, how are they able to get families into some of those properties. And I kind of think that those two extremes are still kind of the future of Anchorage as we start doing more infill development Midtown, elsewhere around there. I think the housing authority is going to be a very integral part of how that comes together. And I think that Muldoon style dwelling type is going to be a fixture for the next 20 years as far as what gets built in the community. I think it's really important housing, really popular, and I think it's really meeting needs quite well. Now, are we looking at redevelopment activities that might tend to be less favorable to low-income families? Yeah, I'm seeing some of that here.
I'd like to add to that, just to clarify, I must have miscommunicated. So we're using data to help us make decisions first, and then the human personal side comes in afterwards, rather than not having the information, because we will make what I call, the opportunity cost. That will always be considered. We don't want to make a move just for an economic reason when there's a whole other opportunity that would cost that wouldn't be good for our community. And so, but what we're trying to do is to first start with what do we have, what is really here, what do the data tell us, and then how do we want schools to look in our city. And so that does have a lot to do with, in fact, some of the prior suggested schools for closure are now offline and not touchable because of the types of programs that they provide for the people in the community. So I don't want to get ahead of the board and the results because they're not finished, but I think that you'll see that we are making choices for children's learning and families, but using good data.
Great.
Is that all, Chris?
Yeah.
Mr. Peterson, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, from what I have been told, that the demographics in Anchorage are that the fastest growing age group are those of us over the age of 65. And so if the population does increase by 15%, but many of those that move into Anchorage are retired, do you think that the student age population will go up 15% as well, or what kind of an increase in students are you anticipating?
I'm mostly looking at facility efficiency. As far as the demographics go, again, I'm coming back to what the ISER forecast is. So I'm looking at their forecast for 5 to 10-year-olds, 11 to 14-year-olds, 15, 19-year-olds, and that's kind of the basis of the forecasting that we've gotten from ISER, from Morgan Economics, and others that are looking at the demographics of what's coming in here. I'm predominantly looking at facility efficiency analysis and kind of reconfirming what they're saying is going to happen. And then I'm looking at this 15% additional housing forecast coming in over a 23-year period. And as I look at the community, I'm seeing there's active housing development here and lots of redevelopment plans and a national climate for reconstruction of older housing. And so, you know, I'm not that pessimistic that we're not going to continue to have student growth here. I'm optimistic that we're going to continue.
Anything else, Mr. Peterson?
All right, thank you.
Mr. Holman.
One, I want to reinforce what Dr. Bishop said, that because there have been questions about why we needed to go to an outside group to do this kind of projection and whatnot. And I think it does provide an unbiased eye. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to do what it's, yeah, there you go. But in making a decision, having that unbiased data so that we can turn to people and say, well, this is why we're doing this, and this is what we think the costs are, and why we think it's worth it to go in this direction. And the other one, I would admit, I'm hung up on exactly the same thing that Mr. Dunbar brought up. We've had a long period where the population has drifted slowly up, but the school count has drifted slowly down. And I don't think there's been a change in private school numbers or other than public school numbers much during that time. And it just makes me suspicious of ISER's projections as well. And part of it is when big events have happened economically and housing has shifted, in some cases, you have people leave and new people come in. And sometimes they bring a lot of kids, and other times there's an exodus of kids and an influx of people that can afford houses they never could afford before. I think Anchorage is more complicated than some places, just because people come and go for a little bit different set of reasons. But I do think that is going to be a big question that we're going to have to answer as a board, is where do we think these kids are coming from? And I'm wondering if ISER's calculations are a little bit dated, or I don't know. I'll need to go look at that. I wouldn't want to argue with them too much, but.
Ms. Bishop, yes.
There is a little bit more, not necessarily, we're attracting more students. So presently, 2,700 students reside in a statewide school that they reside in Anchorage in the municipality, but they attend a statewide school. So part of the board and what we've always done in Anchorage is offer choices with our immersion programs and other programs. We are opened up last year the middle college, which brought in about 25 kids from other places back. And so every student that comes back to Anchorage is technically a new student. Not to think that 2,700 would choose us, but we want to provide schools and are changing some programs and being innovative. The King Tech is another example of that, where students have applied to be there that go to other districts' schools. We're looking at getting more into a blended learning homeschool as well, statewide, so that the children that live here that really do want to choose Anchorage will have some flexibility. So some of the market is actually already here. We're just not capturing it. Not outside of private schools. So this is totally not private schools. This is public schools in Alaska. Over 2,700 of our kids go elsewhere. We want them back.
Appreciate that. I was listening last night. We had testimony in Pili. These are kids going through a leadership program. 3 of the kids said they were in the college program, where they're going to high school but taking college credits. So I appreciate the way that's reaching out to that group. It's the kids we want to keep here. So I'm just listening to them saying, I'm going to this school. This is what I'm doing. So thank you. Mr. Dyson, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for helping us. And I endorse getting somebody a lot of experience in the outside. But Mr. Dunbar raised a question that's been very interesting to me. The city's population is continuing to increase, and the student population is flattened out or decreasing slightly. There's 2 things about Anchorage's economy that are a bit unique. One of them is we are a resource-driven state economy. So when the oil industry sneezes, we get pneumonia, generally with time lag. And the other one is a huge federal presence here, mostly in the Department of Defense. And those are variables that are very far beyond it. But the other thing that's unique is this state has a very robust homeschool and cyber school, both in statute and the bones are there to make it very well. So I deduce that, as I said earlier, that our demographics haven't changed much, but the choices that parents have for their kids have. And that's got to be a tough one for you to figure out. And it's tough for ICER to figure out what our economic future is. But does your study show another reason that our student population has been flat or decreasing? And have you in other districts had opportunity to have to deal with parental choice, taking kids out of the public school market?
I haven't done a detailed market share analysis for Anchorage. I may be doing that in the near future. But I've done a lot of that elsewhere. And usually what I call the school market share is public schools, charter schools, private and church schools, and then online schools and homeschooling. Nationally, those last 2 categories, online and homeschooling, have grown dramatically. The private school sector has also grown slightly. So going into the future, if you're going to forecast that into the future, we're going to expect some growth. As far as, am I showing we're going to need to build 10 or 15 new schools in the next 20 years? No, I'm not. I'm looking at few new schools to be necessary and other schools to be closed. So I'm not really showing a huge growth in the public school population. I just looked at ICER's figures that they sent me yesterday, and they're showing the city topping out at about 347 and staying there. And they're showing a curve that levels off and stays there. Their age cohort data for school-age children also continues to show growth. Those kids would go into those various sectors of the school market, and the non-public share, the non-public sectors, had been growing over time, and we expect that those will continue to grow. Now, the district has some competitive strategies to try to remain competitive over time and to hold on to a certain market share, and a lot of districts I've worked with have been very successful in that regard. So that's one thing that we might identify as a planning task to address our competitiveness with the other sectors of the education market and how do we compare over time. But monitoring those numbers, I did some work in another big urban school district, and I had 15 or 18 years of public education sector market data, and every year I was tracking it, whether we were up or down. And I think that would probably be in the district's best interest, the data that we can actually get to be tracking our sector sector-based curriculum.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Dyson. That's awesome. Ms. Morissette?
My question is how, because I foresee, we lost 600 students this year roughly, and I foresee that is happening again this year, that we have a large, I think it would be more than what was predicted. That's my personal opinion. But when do you foresee this growth happening?
Well, over the 23-year period between now and 2040, the city is forecasting that we're going to realize that housing growth. Most communities go through these 5-year ups and downs of the business cycle. We've had some of that here. So, for example, 2 years ago in the Matsu, we grew by 750 kids. So they were on that business cycle this year. Matsu is down. So there's also been a lot of regional growth in South Central Alaska, where kids are moving back and forth between the two biggest districts. So some of that's happening as well. But to answer your question is, in that 25-year time frame is when we expect that growth. Obviously, right now we're in a little bit of a down period, but the idea would be that that would come back up in a kind of an oscillating 5-year business cycle.
Anything else, ma'am? Anything else? President?
Could you speak to the different housing plans downtown and how that might be impacting this study?
The city is giving me quite a bit of mid-rise infill projects, and some of those I think include the project up in Jubiac that you mentioned. They're trying to get information associated with that. Those are single-family detached homes in more of the single setting. But through the urban core here in the Midtown area, there's a lot of property that's prime as redevelopment, and quite a bit of that would be redevelopment, not as single-family detached houses, but more of that medium density style product like what you see the housing authority building out along the Mountain Corridor. I would say there are at least a dozen of those.
Anything else, ma'am? Any other questions from us? I mean, members of school board members?
I guess.
Mr. Steele.
Steele. You forgot my name because I was late. Is that it?
No. I was sure with you to some member of school board member. But go ahead, Tim.
I have some questions with regards to, it's a little bit off topic, I suspect, but Iliamna and that decision to close the school, move kids out, neighborhood schools. How has that worked out academically for those kids?
I can.
Well, no,
I just visited a school, but I would say that programmatically for the students, it is going well. It isn't without, of course, changes in the schools. We did build out corridors, if you will, in each of the schools where the students are, because sometimes we're working with kids that might, when they're not happy, they might raise their voices, things like that. So we do have areas that are, so what we targeted were corridors of schools that could be closed for noise sake if we needed to. But academically, it is phenomenal. So what used to happen is FAPE in public education is free and appropriate education, and it's the law is in the least restrictive environment. So for a child that has difficulty with self-awareness and peers, generally along the autism spectrum, having a child far removed on a base to try to reintroduce them to their neighborhood school, places where they have the most support for success, doesn't necessarily happen because it was too difficult to get off of the base into school back again. So now we have small units, not in every school, but in 4 places around the city that could be closer to where someone lives, more of a neighborhood type, to where as the students demonstrate success, they then have opportunity to be with peers. So a heterogeneous group. And they have, people that go with them to transition, because the goal is to absolutely have students transition back into our population.
Mainstream.
Yeah.
If are you having to do, if I may,
go ahead, sir.
Are you having to convert space in neighborhood schools for some of those kids that need more intensive or
We did, yes, so we did change some of the
Segregated.
space to have quiet rooms so that someone could go and, you know, kind of de-escalate and have some time. So we created spaces that were safe for kids, safe for staff, away from other students, because a lot of times it is just a cooling down and then re-entry. But I mean, some of the things that parents have said is my child's in 4th grade, he's never gone on a field trip. He can go on a field trip. They are, the success of academics and social behavior is super high. We still have students, we did build out, which some folks don't know, the highest level of intensity at Mount Iliamna. We have an elementary portion now at Whaley. So we still have the highest level of behavior for you know, students that can harm themselves or others unintentionally. We still have those students that aren't safe. We still have, or potentially could be unsafe. We still have elementary program now. We built out space in Whaley. And then our goal then, though, is to have them, once they learn behaviors, transition to a neighborhood school, transition to a classroom, if possible. Some students it will never be possible. They'll spend their whole education at Whaley, but we wanted to have the opportunity for kids to be successful. Most of the work is not in academics. Students are very smart, can read, write, perform like anyone else. It's really on the behavioral side. But again, what happens when students age out? They are in our community. We need to intervene as early as possible to have our community work in a livable space.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of academics for all students, quite frankly, in terms of online courses or, you know, courses provided by others. I'm hoping we're seeing a lot of families taking advantage of those opportunities to help their kids out too.
Mr. Dunbar, sir.
No, I'm good.
You were in line earlier. Any other questions from people? Anybody online that would like to ask a question? Amy?
I'm good. I'm just listening, taking it all in. Thank you.
Suzanne?
I'm good too, thanks.
How about the guy that come?
Miss Snelling?
I'm good for now. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just briefly,
Mr. Costa.
I would appreciate it if, when you guys get to the point of a published report, you can kind of state your methodology for addressing those concerns that I brought up, kind of so that I can understand, because it would be better to also see a third-party analysis of those concerns before we bring it home and ask the question here. Thank you.
Shannon, I appreciate you coming to talk to us. If you don't have the information you need, get a hold of, including the Native Corporation, because I've gone over their diagrams and what they want to build out there. Significant amount of homes coming online when that project is done. And the problem with Anchorage is we have no buildable homes, no space here, so everybody's going to the valley for cheaper homes. I think if you got in Fred's area this development going online, you're going to have people wanting to live here rather than spend hours trying to get into Anchorage from the Masso, as we saw yesterday. But if Davis can't get you that, get a hold of me, and I'll get with the Coota Native Corporation to make sure you have the projections on what they want to build, because I've looked at it. But the city's been, I've seen the city's diagram, but they only take the bowl into consideration. And there's a lot more to Anchorage than just the bowl. Well, I keep trying to tell them that, and they keep saying they're showing the smaller projection on the bowl. And this town does have land. It's just a matter of bringing it online, whether it's building the water system to deliver the water, or take the water out. It can be done. So anyway, anything else from you? Oh, sorry, Star.
No, that's okay. I was just going to make a comment about Mount Iliamna, but we kind of moved on. So.
That's all right. Go ahead. I know you're invested in that.
Well, so what I can tell you about Mount Iliamna is that we do have challenges in our schools. We have some noise. When we say they raise their voices, I'm going to be very honest and say that sometimes we have a few meltdowns, and that is part of this. Yeah. And that's what I call it, because I have a child, of course, had a child with my life. But, and there are some noise issues, but we are tackling those. I mean, we are working with the teachers, we are working with the staff. I can tell you that when we first started this program, we had parents saying we don't want those kids at our schools, and we're not hearing that anymore. So, and just in that sense itself, it's successful that we've been able to integrate and build more empathy, and we do see our academics and our students and their social emotional growth growing.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Going down to the next one, the biggie at item number 3 is the bus barn. Understand our development going into Tudor and Elmore is being delayed until the bus barn situation's dealt with. And so we need to figure out what's going on with that so we can move forward with that huge development. So a lot of jobs coming to Anchorage when that development's put in there. So what's going on with the bus barn?
Well, we were the ones who requested this go on
Okay.
the agenda.
That's fine, let's address it.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Okay, who's here from the administration? Mr. Schutte, come and talk to us about what's happening with the bus barn. I understand you went to the Trade Council Tuesday and talked to the Trade Council, because I do have the minutes from it. So go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Chris Schutte, Director of Office of Economic and Community Development. Real brief update. First, a statement of thank you to the school district, and the school district team has been such a valuable resource throughout this process. We're currently wrapping up the site selection report. Site selection study for the location options of the facility will be wrapped up in April. By the end of April is our target. And the school district and the team will get pulled back together when that report is drafted, and we'll work through the findings of that report. The site selection report required by code to go to planning and zoning. So during the conclusion of April, when we get back together as a team and finalize the selection report, our next step is to get it on the planning and zoning commission's calendar. Right now, they actually do have a relatively light calendar heading into the summer. That can change at a moment's notice. So our hope is to have it on the calendar no later than June for consideration and approval.
Okay, we got some questions for you. I'm putting them in line now. Forrest.
Yeah, Chris, so obviously that site selection process is designed to narrow it down to one site or several sites, is that right?
Several sites usually, yes.
So how far are we along there, and what are the sites currently being discussed?
You'll see all of that at the end of April when the site selection study is complete. And
Okay.
bring it forward.
So can you give me a preview of several of them?
Ask the same question multiple ways, the answer is still no. I don't have a site selection study with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
President.
I would just make a special request to the Assembly to please keep the board and the AST administration apprised all along the way, even when it's going to code committee, so that we know where that's.
Tim, we're going to do all we can to make sure you guys are in the forefront of this, because I know you're concerned about this town's concerned about it.
Right.
We'll
No
make sure you're
surprises
on the
with
list.
policy, we know.
Okay, let's see. I've got Pete.
Mr. Welton's in line too.
I know John's coming next, but Pete
I
was.
think John's up next.
You were actually on next. You're not?
I'm good.
John?
Well, I'm surprised at that comment, because I would think you'd be talking to the school district nonstop. Like, what are your criteria for a bus barn? I mean, they should not be requesting.
Yeah, and that part's already been done, John. So the execution or the completion of the site selection report study itself is what's underway currently. But the school district has been very, very engaged, very engaging even throughout this entire process, and of course will be throughout both once the draft report is completed, and then beyond as it heads in through the legislative process.
And do you feel that's the case?
I do, and initially when we first started, we felt that we weren't as engaged, and since then we have been. You know, I testified at that one thing that everyone hates bus barns, and so they hate them, but they're a necessary evil. So we kind of did see this coming down the road, that initial, let's get this done, and so we're happy and thrilled to be working and going through the process now, so that the public is informed as well, because it will have to go somewhere. And but everybody's eyes wide open as we go in is all we ask for.
Anything else, John?
No, thank you.
Pete, coming back to you. Anything? Tim?
Yeah, are we looking at a couple of sites, or are we looking at perhaps a greater number of sites with a smaller number of buses at each site, that kind of thing?
So
some
the
efficiency
site
of travel.
selection process itself, what it establishes is the criteria for any public facility of any type, and this is very specific. site selection analysis establishes criteria through which you will evaluate options for location of a public facility. This is a fun exercise, very specific need and purpose and area, if you will, which is a little bit different than most site selection studies we've done in the past, say for public buildings or other facilities. So it is establishing a series of criteria, and then through that criteria, looking at available options across the subject area for ASD's interest, and then applying that criteria to multiple sites to try and evaluate them analytically.
Jim, do you want to ask a question you can't tell the answer to, or what?
You know, it just seems to me that there's a logic in terms of delivery of the service, buses and students, that says smaller number, more of them spread around, as opposed to centralizing it and having them run time greater. Certainly maintenance of the buses, if it's centralized, it's a lot easier and more efficient. But it just seems to me there's two models there, and it'd be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see what you come up with. So,
Ms. Morissette.
Yes, I have a question. So when these sites are announced, and we as ASU find out what those sites are also, can we say no, they don't meet our requirements,
sure,
and they come off the list before they go public?
Anything else, Star? Okay. President, anything? Chris?
Just before they go public, the school district will have a chance to make a veto of the site?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's their service, their site, much like any other agency that goes through a site selection process. If the sites that are presented, DHHS being a great example, the last time we did a site selection study for that facility, 3 locations were chosen. DHHS chose none.
Right, that's a different thing though. So,
go ahead, Chris.
That would be done in executive session, or how would that information be communicated that these are the sites that we're proposing that the public doesn't know about?
Quite as formal as an executive session, Senator Constant. There's a 12-member team, I believe is George, made up of ASD and MOA subject matter experts that have been meeting regularly.
Right.
And that group, I think, will take the first blush look at the site selection study and analysis before bringing it forward to the school board, actually the administration and the school board members.
What problem do you bring the assembly into this? I've heard now going to the school board, going to the administration. When do you get the assembly involved in it?
Site selection process, much like rezone or any other sort of land use and zoning application, it goes through a planning and zoning commission review and approval, at which point it gets forwarded to the assembly.
Forrest?
Well, I think this gets to what Chris was, I think, getting at. You know, the moment anything starts going to assembly members or starts going to school board members, then it essentially is public, right? I mean, unless you're very, in a targeted way, choosing each of us and doing a sort of a one-on-one briefing, then you can avoid the Open Meetings Act. Not avoid it, but you can still comply with it and not have it publicly noticed. But presumably this would become public pretty quickly. Is that right?
Once the draft site selection study has been reviewed and agreed to by all parties, then it is formally entered into the Planning and Zoning Commission's calendar. At that point, it is considered a public document.
Any other questions?
So just clarification.
Yes, Star. Now go to Chris.
That would be that once it has been presented to ASD and we're on board with the site selection, then it becomes public. Okay.
Chris?
I'm just still trying to chew through that process in my mind. So it sounds to me actually then like the school board as a body is included in the pre-completion process. They're just a stakeholder in the process.
Actually, a better way to think of it, Senator Constant, is the school board and the school district is the client. They are the applicant. It's their product.
Right, and so until it's gone through all those internal processes, it's not released to the public.
Yeah, it's a draft document.
That's fair. Okay, thank you.
Will the facility, Chris, you have to help me with this, will the facility be owned by ASD or MOA? Who will own the facility?
That's a little bit more complicated. George and I talked
George, we've known each other for 30 years. Who's going to own the property, George?
The municipality
They'll own the property and they'll own the facility.
And so ASD will know about it before we will.
ASD, the board, will have to concur that the sites that's been provided to the staff of ASD will meet the needs. ASD staff will prioritize those sites based on which ones meet the needs the best. It will then go to the board for consideration. Don't forget, though, that there's also a public process that takes place throughout this whole thing. And those of you that are sitting on the assembly may remember, and the board too, may remember that in the past, when the district has either acquired and or built facilities, public facilities on municipal land, that there was a joint school board and assembly meeting where this was discussed. And I think you remember that. What they did is they brought both the school board as well as the assembly together for a joint meeting for the purpose of presenting and deciding on the appropriate site to go forward. And it could be done separately or it could be done jointly. The last time we did this, like 3 times before that, it was done jointly, but it can be done separately. But regardless, the board has to concur, the assembly has to concur, and of course planning and zoning has to concur to make darn sure that it meets all of the requirements of Title 21.
Because each of us have constituents that if a bus barn's put near their house will not be happy, and we're going to hear about it. I hear about now where it's located currently. In my area, I hear about it all the time.
Chris would be glad to trade
Chris.
for Francis shelter.
Well, no. What I would suggest is you might hear.
Good idea, Fred.
You might hear the folks in the council say they would support putting in a bus barn at the MLMP campus should the sale proceed, rather than an increase of, 200 more shelter beds. And so you might actually hear that that's something they would support.
I don't think it's big enough.
Anyhow.
For the chair, though, don't forget we
That's
have
not a
very
good
specific
location.
customer needs.
I know.
The schools,
Location.
are not close.
Well, the biggest thing is the transportation in and out of where the bus center is. You've got to make sure it's on a good road structure. So anyway, yes, Pete.
So we can't put it in the river. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have we considered building the bus barn underground to get away from this fumes problem?
They're still going to come up and go out.
That's cost.
Yeah, superintendent.
The new buses that we have is
Yes.
the biggest concern isn't fumes necessarily anymore because we're replacing those. It is noise and the beepers, and so that the actual evidence that demonstrates there's fewer fumes but more noise because every time you back up one of those buses, beep, beep, So, but our newest buses are about the same as a car for efficiencies with the old diesel kind and emissions are going away, and we're purchasing better ones. It's just that it's extremely loud as well is the biggest concern that we've heard so far.
And for the chair, I'll add that while we have not yet dreamed of building it underground, I do like the idea. I'm going to jot it down. We have, however,
Someplace under Fire Island.
By an international provider of aluminum and steel framed fabric structures. It's essentially similar to the dome, but it is not air supported or air inflated. They have been reading the headlines over the past year, and they came and pitched their product to the building safety department and the real estate department to see if it was interesting. It's sort of interesting. We just had that last 2 weeks ago. So I don't think that that's a likelihood, but they do actually provide that product, a fabric-covered frame for bus facilities in particular across the country. So it's something worth looking at. It affects the economics, it affects the operations of the buses, but I do really like the idea of underground for that.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Dunbar.
So this is a topic we've touched on before, but I want to keep the discussion going forward. Many other school districts use the city buses to transport children, to transport students. Is that something that we are still actively engaging on for maybe some of the older students, for example? We have financial challenges with People Mover, and I know that school buses are not cheap to maintain. So can anyone explain to me if this discussion is ongoing with maybe a portion of our student population?
Through the chair, I
Superintendent?
can share that we do have a portion because the city has provided passes, so we have
Right.
a joint.
East High School has a bunch.
Actually, all the high
Bartlett,
schools,
Clyde,
but the utilization, if you could come forward.
If I might, I'm Tom Roth, I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Where we are on this one right now, the city is in a contract with the district to provide busing transportation to all of our high school and all of our middle school students during the academic year. And then we have a provision to renew this contract with the city each year.
Do we know the utilization? I think was one of the questions. Where are we going?
I do not know what the utilization rate is. Some schools, East High School as an example, that utilization rate is much higher than, say, West High School, South High School, just because of the numbers of routes where the city, most of the routes are internal to.
Can I ask a follow-up, Mr. Chairman? So, has that program been utilized to the point where it's reduced the number of buses or the need for a number of buses, or is it merely a supplement at this point?
It's purely in addition to the school busing that we provide.
What kind of change would have to happen so that for your the next time you re-upped on buses, for example, you could buy slightly fewer buses?
Well, in really two conversations here. First is that people move routes. They're very specific. But when you talk about busing, and I've got Mr. Chuck Moore here, he can talk in more detail. But we go inside the neighborhoods to pick up kids. And that's probably the biggest difference here. We have 240 some odd.
235 routes.
235 routes. The city runs 12.
What would have to happen specifically
Go ahead,
is that we
Superintendent.
deny busing to high school kids in certain areas and just say we're not doing it anymore.
Yep.
And then parents would have to figure it out and, well, then we offer this. So, I mean, that is really what we would have to ask people. We would have to deny them something to do something else. And I'm not so, I don't know what the interest is there of our board to do that. Certainly that would be allowable because busing is not, transportation while it's funded by the state, it is not a constitutional right. Okay, education is, but not transportation. However, that just being a superintendent and in the business for 28 years is a big ask. So what we try to do is incentivize things, get people to do it, then slowly down, scale down. And perhaps that's the manner in which we go to maybe possibly incentivize where your routes are. If we could take one bus off, off the docket, that is a good savings to us, more than a salary for, it's a FTE and a half, for us to do that, year savings that would move on into the future. So maybe we start having those conversations where the routes are, try to incentivize to then build the capacity, then to lower the capacity. But the sharp cutoff would be worse than the bus barn, I guess.
Anything else, sir?
No, thank you.
Okay. President?
She just covered what I was thinking about this.
Chris?
Yeah, just back on the bus barn issue, something someone's been working on as a proposal for the downtown is changing the way parking is done on certain streets. If we eventually get back control of our 5th and 6th Avenues, putting in a parking lane in the middle and having it be 2 lanes passing in the same direction, but you pull in and you pull out forward. So I would suggest, if you guys haven't really contemplated how to do that, you can eliminate those beeps going backwards by traffic flow through your parking, through your bus barn. And I hope you look at that because it's definitely a simple solution to that noise problem. The sound of idling buses is never going to be resolved until we get to electric buses, but those beeps are pretty annoying.
Tim?
Yeah. Buses are used for all kinds of things, and not only day-to-day activities, but extracurricular activities as well. How often do we look at this window here and see the whole street blocked off for buses because of events at the convention center? It seems to me that we've got to solve the bus problem, and I think it's, in my estimation, it's better to have a number of sites throughout. And if we can build an interior warehouse of some sort that can be drive in and out that collects the exhaust and treats it that way, it seems to me that would be more palatable than neighborhoods. But we're going to have bus bars. That's part of our it's part of our culture, if you will, and it's also a necessity. So, good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Star?
So, my question, guys, is even if we were to go with busing for high schoolers through the municipality, that doesn't, I mean, I don't think we can reduce the number of buses we have because of our other obligations with our elementary students. I mean, it would reduce some costs, but we still have to have the same number of buses.
I don't have it here.
We run a three-tier system to get to a board member Marsette's contract. We transport our high school students first, turn buses, pick up the middle school students, turn buses, and then pick up elementary schools.
And the old Star?
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out that, you know, if we were to do this, it might be some cost savings, but we would still have to probably maintain the same number of buses.
Mr. Dyson, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Which one was?
It's interesting to have some time perspective on it. As is often the case, Mr. Dunbar has been asking some really seminal questions. There are 4 areas that you think logically could be combined: building maintenance, bus barn, vehicle maintenance, libraries, and something else I had. Anyways, back in the day, Kansas City had the buses integrated for the city and their libraries, and but just practically speaking, there's always real world problems, and particularly on buses, both sides, you know, really need to be flexible to be able to change strategies and so on and so forth, and coordinating those gets really tough. Kansas City found out, and we ought to understand it, that putting adults and kids, vulnerable kids, in the same bus or the same library, you know, child predators always want to go to a target-rich environment. And here, and Mr. Constantine probably knows this better than me, but lots of our dysfunctional people who have been in prison, treatment, are indigent, get bus passes, you know, and you go down here and look at the folks at the central bus thing down here, and I can't judge people by their appearance and so on, but you gotta say I'd be uneasy putting an 8-year-old kid on that bus, and particularly sometimes in the day. But I'm delighted to come back to the city thing and see that you guys have integrated building maintenance, you know, and that's to your credit. But bus barns and vehicle maintenance, which I think I know something about, when I got down to the real world problems that integrating that, it wasn't just adult males trying to protect their territory. It was some real world stuff. So we always need to be looking at the ideals to see if we can make it work. But the problems turned out to be subtle, esoteric, and sometimes real. Darn it.
Dr. Bishop.
Yes, I'd just like to finish it, just to hopefully let the school board, if they hadn't read it recently, or the assembly, that we went under a personal audit with our bus system, and there were very few additional efficiencies that could be made. In fact, like school districts of our size and like cities of our size, we are one of the lowest cost per students, most efficient, because we do that 3-tier system, which makes school start times very difficult. So we've given up, you know, some other flexibility to be able to have a low cost. So I want to just let you know that we've self-evaluated, pulled in people to help us. How can we be more efficient? And our routing system was audited, as well as the tiers, and we're getting blood from the turnip. So, and that was the Council of Great City Schools that came out and did that a few years ago. So I just want to thank our folks that do the work. But it makes, you know, closing buildings and probably working, you know, with the city, as well as school start time, other issues difficult to solve, because we don't want to then impact this financially. So it just, there's just all this give and take, but certainly willing to, I would love for kids to learn to use public transportation so that they become public transportation users and efficient as they grow older.
Thank you. Tam, and then Chris, and then Pete.
Yeah, I just, one thing I wanted to say, you piqued my interest talking about those dome-type buildings, because I don't know how many people are aware there's a state law that says you have to have a bus at a certain temperature before you can go out and pick up the kids, so that necessitates the warming up in the morning. And if that were happening safely in sometimes the tent area to reduce the noise, it also reduces our costs for fuel and how long you have to warm up the bus. So that, there's some innovative ideas. And secondly, I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity for students to ride the public bus that allows them to stay after school, to get extra help, to go to the library, to participate in extracurricular. So in a sense, we've taken buses off of the road or private transportation and allowing kids to use the people mover in that pass system. I've talked to many students at East High School, and when I talk about an event downtown and I say, do you have a way to get there? And they'll whip out their pass. Say, yeah, I know how to use the buses. So it is progression.
Thank you, President. Chris, and then Pete.
Yeah, thanks. So briefly, to Mr. Dyson, to your point, I have a very good anecdote to make it really clear the nature of the problem in the downtown, at least. I know a family that lives 6 lots from an elementary school. 6 lots. And they lived in Finland when their kids were 8 and 9 years old. And in Finland, when they were there, the kids rode the city buses at 8 years old all the way across town to go to their school. But in the neighborhood of the downtown, they weren't safe to walk 8 lots alone across the street to get to their school. And so the parents had to walk their kids to school. Right? That's the nature of the problem in a very concrete way, in a specific anecdote. And something of note to this conversation, someone might have whispered in my ear that is germane, is that there are no buses to South Anchorage any longer that are people mover. And so, there are ways that this system wouldn't work at all for some people. Someone might have also suggested that those high school kids may already have a BMW, but that's another story. So anyhow, we have some real disparities here. So, and they go both ways.
Pete? How's your BMW doing, Pete?
Yeah.
I didn't make
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's been studies done in thinking about the possibility of changing start times for high school students. Have we looked at if the high school students start later in the day, that more of them might be dropped off by their parents, and that we might need less busing if we change the start time? Just happen to think of that.
We're looking at those things, but there's minimal utilization for high schools already. So we'll take a look. Like if you see a bus that very few kids are on, you guarantee it's a high school bus, and then they fill up as the kids get younger. So that is incorporated in the study.
Okay, thank you,
Mr. Steele.
It seems to me we looked at that not too long ago in terms of changing the start times for the various levels of schools, and we got a reality check when parents said no, the older kids have to watch the younger kids, and if you take them out of the household before, then we aren't going to be able to have 2 incomes or something like that. And it's a system that works. If it's not broke, let's not screw it up. So
start times?
Through the chair, to your point, some people do feel it's broke, some people feel it's not. But the work that we're doing is actually incorporating going to different sites. We are working in different neighborhoods as well as different sectors, like the military was, that. We actually met this morning with Campfire, getting with Red, our different community resources that work with families of low income that have actually all stratas have kids, after school or whatever, what they can afford or not, or have access to. And maybe the access is just because, like, a bus doesn't run here, that they don't have any, maybe after school, events in their area. So it's pretty comprehensive, and we're going to let the information guide us and how people feel about it and the move. But there's really mounting evidence on the science of it is in favor of later start times,
For
but we
sure.
are
Less-
including the reality of how we live and our families. So that's not void of that.
So anything else on this issue? Let's move down to the next one. The ICER study, item number 4. I've got a meeting today with ICER at 3 o'clock because what I want to find out is what they're going to charge us to do the study. And this came up from Dave Donnelly. Dave, you want to explain how important this study is and the last time, from your knowledge, it was ever done?
Yeah, full study, as you know, that one of the components of the state school funding formula is a district cost differential. And it's based on Anchorage being the least expensive place in Alaska to provide education, public education. There's pretty strong evidence that that's no longer the situation, because back in 2015, ICER was authorized to do a study by the legislature of the cost of providing teachers. And Anchorage was no longer the least expensive place to pay for teachers. And teachers are the largest single component in the district cost adjustment. So ICER believes pretty strongly that it's out, the whole differential system's out of whack. And it's been, I think, 12 years, 15 years, between 12 and 15 years, that a study hasn't been done, a new study. When the law was first adopted, after about a decade, there was a new study and that was implemented, but then subsequently there hasn't been one. So it's been quite a few years. And what it could be quite dramatic, or it could be modified. It's hard to know exactly, because in dealing with ICER, they've said, well, if it was just we took the existing study and just updated it, Anchorage would have a very significant increase in its level of school funding under the existing foundation formula. But and analysis by our finance people said that if you just superimposed our position with the Matsu, so to speak, it could be as much as $30 million. But that's unlikely to happen, because ICER wants to re-examine some of the criteria they've used, and they believe that they underweighted some of the objective factors for rural school districts, fuel oil and things like that, and they want to look at modifying some of those if they were to do a whole new study, so that would reduce some of what Anchorage would gain. So Anchorage, but they said no matter what Anchorage is going to gain was their projection of what would happen. But it depends on how much they play around with the other factors in the study, how much that could be. So it could be anywhere between 4 and 15 or 16 $million. And the last time I talked to the head of ICER, she was projecting that it would be between $125,000 and $145,000 to do the study. It takes about 18 months.
The reason I'm bringing it up is because I've said I've got a meeting with ICER, and we've got first quarter budget revision coming up. So I want to know what the dollar amount is and bring it to the Assembly to see if you want to go forward with funding the study. We have the potential of getting more money for the school district from the state if that's the way it turns out, but they'll also come back and say, hey, there is no change, it's correct. So that'll be up to the Assembly to decide if first quarter budget revision you want to spend the money to do the study. But I've got a meeting today at 3 o'clock, so just to let you know where it's going on that.
Thanks for doing it.
Questions? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
No. We're down to shared services, Fred. What do you want, traffic out there is tough or something? Shared services. Who put that on there? On our agenda?
Talked about it.
What?
I think we already talked about it.
Okay.
Unless there's some proposals.
Unless there's any new developments.
Is there anything else you want to discuss? It's a combined group. Go ahead, Star.
On shared services, have we realized any savings from either side?
Yeah.
I think it was savings avoidance, cost avoidance rather than true
Okay.
reduction.
I think the question would be, let's find those numbers, not let's just guess.
I know, I don't think, is there anybody here from the administration that could give us hard numbers?
I thought the
Anything with the school district that's got hard numbers on how it's
I would
worked?
defer to maybe the committee that goes back, that they revisit that they do that. We can get those rather than commenting.
And I would, through the chair, if I might.
Go ahead, sir.
It's probably premature, given the amount of time that we've been doing these services, to really provide some evaluation of whether there are cost savings. The immediate savings to the district, as an example, we now share the same operating system for worker compensation claim. That saved us up front about $300,000, but now that we are in the process of working together, it's been less than a year. So I think we come back after about a year's time and really take a good look at what it's doing for both the district and for the city.
Yes, sir.
It seems to me that we picked up, we modify those traditions, if you will, based upon the facts on the ground, pretty much on an annual basis, in terms of whose ox has been gored more than the other ones, you know, in terms of who has the money. Sometimes they simply, or the city picks up costs that have been traditionally school district costs, it seems to me, and picks them up because they know that there's no money to pick them up otherwise. And so a lot of that happens incrementally, and that's how traditions are born, I suppose. But, shared costs are a fact of life, and so are budget issues.
Mr. Donnelly.
I had something I wanted to bring up. First of all, I wanted to really thank the municipality for the school resource officers that are in our schools. Yes. When we first started putting police in Anchorage schools, I was kind of hesitant about it, questioned it, but now I am 100% on board with this program. And recently in Florida, the Florida legislature now is going to put SROs in every one of their schools. Yeah, yes. But we recently saw somebody that didn't stay outside the building, too.
Yeah, that's true.
And we are the school district, and I'm just speaking for myself here. I have to disclaim, I'm not speaking for the board, but I know there are gaps right now because of the structure of the union contract, the workday. The 410 structure does not fit the needs of schools, which are 5 days a week, and also there's seasonal breaks too. And I was under the impression that there had been negotiations or discussions going on. Last night I got some information that those hadn't succeeded, and I'm very concerned about that because I really think there's just a very logical opportunity here for the SROs to be on a different schedule that provides a more full coverage during school days and during school, the school year, with options to have time off for other times of the year where we don't need them in our schools. And all that could be done with zero cost, it seems like, by trading off and just adjusting the schedule. I'd really like to hear a discussion of that.
Okay. Forrest?
Yeah, well, do we have anyone here from APD, or I don't believe we do. I think that's a great topic, and perhaps it's a different schedule, or perhaps it could be, our SROs, I believe, during the summer when the schools are closed for the most part, they are doing other things for the municipalities. They are doing traditional police work, or I think some of them become bicycle patrol units.
But he said he was going to change it this year.
Which is great. Well, whatever he does, we should definitely talk to Chief Dahl about that. But what that suggests to me is that there isn't a clear delineation between an SRO and other types of Anchorage police officers. I'm sure it requires additional training. But I'm wondering if we could have a system where that fifth day is covered by a different individual, or if there's some other way to break it up. If we can't get past the 410 thing, maybe 3 days and 2 days with a different officer. But however we do it, I agree with you that it doesn't make sense to leave a day unpoliced. Although, do we have so it's only in high schools that we have SROs, is that correct? Or part-time in middle schools?
And middle school, too, a couple of them.
Is it all?
Not all of them.
No. So a couple of them.
And in some cases, are there two in some? So you just have one. It's not like they're totally without coverage,
Well,
right?
that does occur when one of the officers is ill,
Right.
and it's their day to be there by themselves.
Sure,
we'll
they're
get
clear
jacked.
duty for some reason.
If I may.
Go ahead, Tim.
They're assigned by attendance area. They basically, but they spend most of their time in the high schools. Having had kids in the school before the program started and during its build-up, and still checking in with the high schools, it's a fantastic program. They're visible. They're out greeting kids. They're walking the halls. But they also go to the middle schools, touch base. They're known at the middle schools by at least the administration and kids, and they go to elementary school should it be necessary. But they touch base with them. They're known, and I think it's a fantastic program that has worked incredibly well for Anchorage.
Deanna and then Andy.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what I understand from talking with SROs and being in school buildings. They were never assigned to be at the school or to protect the school, but in essence, we set up substations for them.
Yeah.
There's an office, there's a computer, there's a phone. They're in and out a lot, but they may be on calls out in the community in that area that have nothing to do with the schools themselves, but they kind of base out of that. And what comes from that is, number one, if there's a situation in a school that needs an officer, more than likely it's going to be that SRO who has some contact with the kids, who understands school policy, who understands where we're coming from. And I think it's real important we emphasize to the community, they've never been part of the school discipline process. That they're not there to augment what we're doing, but at the moment that it actually becomes a police matter, there's someone we're very familiar with who understands what we've probably done to do a handoff. What it's meant is Anchorage, I don't think, is caught up in what's been referred to as the school to prison pipeline. We don't have a kid who gets mouthy in class and winds up going to jail in handcuffs. That's all still handled inside of by our discipline staff as an internal matter. But the moment a kid actually breaks the law, then there's a very smooth transition to that. So I think if you actually look at how often SROs are in our buildings, it's not nearly as much as people have in mind. And they're not necessarily there when the bell rings in the morning on through the day until it rings in the afternoon. It's very spotty. But they're coming and going. They're available for class presentations. Kids do get to meet them. They do have some time to talk with them. But it's not nearly what Florida's talking about. If we were actually staffing up to that point, even just for our high schools, then you're looking at a dramatic increase in costs and manpower. I think what we have is incredibly valuable, and the long-term goal is that it reduces negative contact between kids and law enforcement, and I think it's been working well on that.
Okay. Superintendent?
I just wanted to update that I have had a couple of conversations with Chief Dahl, and he is working on this, and it was, Vice Chair, what you had said, an agreement between the
APD and unions.
APD and the unions. The suggestion to have it work out wasn't accepted by, basically the summer off is what's really desired, to work full-time, and the need in the city, my understanding, to have during the tourist season to actually have more police officers on. You know, so it's a bigger than just a school issue, probably it is a policing issue, and so we turned it over to them, but we're strong about what we desired and just thought would work. But we are thankful that we do have SROs in our buildings, and but it's bigger than just school district issues.
Thank you.
So.
President?
Yes, I just want to make sure it's clear in people's mind that the community policing efforts that our SROs do works because they build those relationships with the kids.
Yep.
And I've had conversations with many of them where they've said, there's a student who would never approach a police officer in the broader community that says, well, you're different. I don't see you as a cop. And they bring information to them that goes far beyond the purview of the school in terms of protecting our community. And so it's key that there's those relationships. So yes, it's desirable if our SROs aren't there on a certain day that there's coverage from someone else. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have that relationship to be able to effectively do the job that they currently do. That's a key piece.
Thank you, ma'am. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. Andy, you said one of those key words or key phrases that you said because of this program we don't have a school to prison pipeline. And I want to explore that just a little bit. I think I agree with you that because of the school resource officers we do not have a school to prison pipeline. But I would suggest that after the meeting on Tuesday night, there were several teachers who were paying attention to the meeting, and after I commented, they wrote to me and said, hey, you know, we really do have a school to prison pipeline in our city. And so that there are a certain demographic in our school systems that aren't school to college or school to trade program or school to just making it. There is a school to prison program. I agree, though, it's not because of the SROs in our school system. In fact, I think that's an asset to stopping that process because they get engaged with a positive force in the community that they see differently than maybe their perception. So, and that, back to that issue, is an issue that I really want to pay attention to in relationship to the demographics and how we are resourcing our schools.
Okay, on his, we've got a few that want to respond. Superintendent, you want to respond to him?
I just want to say that it is it's an academic achievement to have hope for a future and to be able to read and do, because we have wonderful things for kids for access, but unless they have those building blocks, they don't have access. So we are making some changes and really putting the resources, both people-wise as well as money-wise, into ensuring equity. And you will see that our data is demonstrated by equity, not look at us overall, but by schools, by student groups, and so that is a challenge, but it is one that we feel is the best challenge ever because we care about kids. I believe in that.
Star on Chris's comment.
Yeah, on that comment, Chris, we do still have a prison to pipeline in our schools, and I'm just going to be honest in saying that because we are continually working on our expulsion and our rates out and in, and that is where that prison from pipeline comes from. We do have 2 schools right now that are piloting some programs that I'm very encouraged by in bringing those expulsions down and creating something within the school that is working with our students to target the behavior and why it's happening instead of just kicking them out of school. We'd like to expand that, but of course money is always an issue, but I feel we're going in the right direction. That's something I've felt very strongly about.
Forrest?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think we're kind of talking about 2 different things here. The traditional SRO program, as Member Holloman said, is it's more inward looking in a way, working closely with the students and not being part of the disciplinary process, as you said. But when you said yourself, when a student commits a crime, there's a officer there. But we're talking about something separate. I think what Member Donnelly was raising was a separate issue, which is, tomorrow will be the largest student-led march in the history of the United States, and likely be the largest in the history of the United States. And they're talking about a different kind of specific problem, which is school shootings, school mass shootings. And it is true that often the students that perpetrate those, or the people that perpetrate those, are from within the school. And so in that way, the SROs being able to know them is very helpful. But I think we're also talking about ways to reduce the number of shootings or the fatalities that occur in those shootings. And it's just an unfortunate reality of where we live. And, or the times we live in, rather. And whether or not you think this should be the primary way we do it, or if it is particularly effective, I do think it is part of the discussion. And so I guess the only real substantive thing we can do is, if there become new funds available for that kind of outward-looking security, hopefully federal funds, then we should all be prepared to have that discussion and discuss whether we take those funds and how we deploy those funds. And I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Member Donnelly, but that was what I took your comment to mean.
Well, my first point is that I was hopeful there was going to be some negotiations that spread the time out more. We got additional coverage for the same cost with our SROs. If that's not available, I haven't given up on that hope yet. I would really like to see that as a possibility. That was a non-cost way to provide greater coverage. If that doesn't work, well then I think we need to start talking about other ways to get additional SRO coverage. But a first effort was going to be to try to maximize with what funds we currently have by adjusting the times that they're available. So that's where I was going with that.
I brought that up to Chief Dull a couple months ago, but he's yet to get back to me. Apparently, the negotiation did not work out too well, so I'll ask him again.
It might still be ongoing, but it's not.
Okay.
The two sides haven't come to an agreement.
Mr. Dyson?
Yeah.
Fred's been waiting quite a while. I'm sorry.
Surfaced a problem here, but we have to be very wary of labor contracts that preclude good management decisions. And if we look at the APD's contract, perhaps in the future, there needs to be a provision in which some category of officers can work 5 days, 5 eights, as opposed to only 4 10s, in order for us to be able to make the best management decisions. We need to eliminate the structural, contractual problems that keep you from delivering the best services to the people. And a good example is that I've been working quite a bit trying to rationalize more of the snow clearing between the state and the city. Guess what? The labor contracts are a problem. And I've asked the state to look at, next time we look at that, let's eliminate those structural contract problems that keep us from moving forward on good management decisions. So I'm asking all of us to be thoughtful about that when we approve labor contracts, and to tell our respective administrations when they sit down in negotiations, we got to retain those management prerogatives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Star?
Just want to reach out. I know people have busy schedules, but on April 2nd, our work session, we're actually going to be talking about school safety, and we have some panelists, different individuals from APD, our SROs, from our student advisory, and talking about safety in our schools and what we can do and what we are doing.
4 p.m.
4 p.m.
President, anything else?
Yes, I just want to add 2 things. When we were talking about the school to prison pipeline, just a statistic that Dr. Bishop quotes a lot that has stuck with me because it's so poignant, and why it's so important that we bring our kids to proficiency and to graduation. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you said 70% of the students who are 70% of the students who leave high school don't graduate, live within a 10-mile radius, stay in the 10-mile radius of the high school that they didn't graduate from. So it's not a concern that goes away. They still need to be able to support themselves. And so it's something that we really need to focus on. It's not like, oh, well, they didn't make it, so throw them out and forget about them. No, they'll be back to business. The second thing I want to say, because we're coming close to the end of the meeting, just to back up just a sec, it is my hope that shared services continues to be on this agenda every quarter, and that when I come back to the country in several years, that I'm like so impressed because the shared services between the MOA and the ASD have moved forward instead of moving backwards. Because I think if it goes off the radar of our 2 bodies,
it's forgotten.
Exactly. So I encourage you to continue to move forward on that and to push the powers that be in both of our bureaucracies to make that happen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bring Shockley,
Dave?
please.
I've been trying to, as a potential first responder myself, I've been trying to identify, from a tactical point of view, what are police and law enforcement are going to be faced with if we're confronted with a school shooting. And I've been trying to identify if there's any central location where information is available to first responders regarding situations that may be occurring in a school. This is a school district and municipality and federal law enforcement coordination issue. I haven't been able to identify that if I was a law enforcement officer responding, that it would be easily accessible to me, knowledge of known threats, identification of who your key contacts are at that school, some sort of floor plan for that school, so I would know, what the school looked like. And I would like to see and make sure that we have a system where all that's put into one central database that's available to any emergency responders, so they have those tools available to deal with any potential threats.
Lisa, would you set that as topic up for our next public safety committee meeting, and ask Dave Donnelly to attend it, and the superintendent if you want to go.
We have, just so you know, we do have an agreement with Chief Dahl, since that, and this has happened, where previously the police department would request footage. They now have direct access to footage of our buildings, so if they did receive a call, they would know what was happening. They already do have floor plans of the buildings. We are considering entries, keys, things like that, and finding out, swipe entries. As far as communication amongst us, we still do struggle with that in regard to mental health as well as police, as well as schools. So the school law enforcement is very clear. We just, another area that is mental health and information that might behoove school districts. So we are moving along that path and have some of those that we will share when the board asks. We could answer those questions for you as well. And in regard to, just to share with everyone, there was a grant for resource officers in schools, and that's how it started many years ago at the federal government. And Mr. Holloman mentioned the school to prison pipeline was a study that they did to end that federal funding because school resource officers, schools were negating their responsibility to do simple discipline and just calling an officer. So something that would ordinarily happen in a school, like a fight or just a disagreement, would automatically get pushed to the law enforcement side. And I think what he and I know as educators is we don't want that to happen, that the school resource officer is the community liaison and doesn't take over our responsibility for minor discipline. And it was taken back, and it was done in major cities. So that study was called School to Prison Pipeline, and that's how they ended the federal funding. And it's good to know that now nationally they are saying, whoa, the world, different things are happening now, and maybe there's a different, are we utilizing resource officers differently? But positively, Anchorage hasn't done what that national study has found. I believe Mr. Holloman is kind of on that same page. That was the study of what it was called, and we try not to have, the resource officers are not replacing our assistant principals. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for being here. We're about out of time.
I do have one more substantive issue that has been in the news a little bit, and it might not be something that we can tackle today, but for future conversations. And it's the issue of rising interactions of marijuana on campus and what the strategies are to deal with that and how we can be supportive in that. It's no secret I'm supportive of the industry, but at the same time I want to ensure that our kids aren't being harmed, that our schools are safe, and that our educational process is fair to anyone who comes in. And so I've heard it in the news, and I don't know what is happening in terms of proactive management and to avoid driving people to prison for little things. And so I would love to have that talk at some point in the future.
That actually came from Mr. Donnelly's question in the board meeting to say, has this changed? And when we looked into it, we were astonished ourselves at the increase, and because probably just the availability of it. But it's just like cigarettes, kids know they shouldn't bring on campus, but we'll share some of our pre-work to have kids not get in trouble.
Right.
Well, Superintendent, we've got a meeting coming up June 8th, so that would be a good subject for us to discuss. If you would, please. Anything else in the body?
Mr. Trini?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I've been so patient. I've been in the queue for like 20 minutes.
I know. It's great. I'm not used to being patient. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No, I just wanted to tag on to what Mr. Donnelly said, because many years ago, I sat down with Chief View and we talked specifically about the SROs, the cost of the SROs, and how we could get full coverage in the schools. And just by switching from 10-hour days to 8-hour days, we could have the same coverage and save $1 million a year. That was probably 2014. We had that discussion. But I would say, I'm one that would support the changing of the hours and doubling the SRO coverage. You would get effectively what Mr. Donnelly has keyed in on. He's absolutely right. And I actually have the financial information from APD to back it up. It came from them a number of years ago. But so I think he's going down the right path, I believe. With that said, I know we're ending, so I just want to make a couple of comments in general and say, I really am very appreciative to the coordination and the discussion and between ASD last night, Member Snelling, myself, and the Anchorage Police Department. I know Tom probably regretted the fact that he gave me a cell phone number, but he was fantastic. And between the three agencies, we had a huge impact in the Chudiak Eagle River community, and I think today ASD shut down 9 schools out here specifically because of traffic. And I think it really highlights the fact that it is of everybody's best interest that we clearly, quickly communicate with each other and keep those lines open, because we don't want a repeat of what happened yesterday. And I specifically want to thank ASD for closing those schools today, because they really helped take a lot of traffic off of the roadway in order for us to actually manage today's commute. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Being in school would take them off.
Go ahead, Chris.
We should just take a
Got a
moment
minute left.
and thank you for your service and congratulate you for your next adventure. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I need a motion to adjourn and a second. We're done.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We're done. Thanks for being here.